Clara was determined to have the last say. She longed to emerge victorious in their argument, to solidify her position without fully comprehending the weight her words held. In the heat of the moment, she snapped, "You argue too much for a man. It's no wonder you're so lacking in that way." The moment those words left her lips, the room's atmosphere shifted. The tension that had built during their confrontation didn't explode. It collapsed into a heavy, suffocating silence. Ethan didn't respond with fury. He didn't fire back with a sharp retort. He didn't even raise his voice. He stood frozen, unmoving. His jaw clenched, his hands tightened into fists almost imperceptibly, and his eyes clouded with a pain far deeper than anger. It was raw vulnerability. It was humiliation. It was a wound she had unknowingly reopened. Without a word, he turned and walked away. Clara stood still, expecting him to return, to shout, to argue as he always had. But he didn't. That silence, that crushing stillness, was more devastating than any comeback he could have thrown at her. Most couples quarrel, sometimes with loud voices or one storming off, but they eventually find their way back to each other. That had always been the rhythm for Clara and Ethan. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but their disagreements followed a familiar pattern. A push and pull that always led to some kind of resolution. This time, though, was different. That night, Ethan didn't return to their shared bedroom. At first, Clara thought he just needed space, that he was calming down. Perhaps he'd slip into bed later, after she'd fallen asleep. Maybe by morning, things would feel normal again. But when she reached for him the next day, his side of the bed was untouched. A quiet dread settled in her chest. This wasn't his usual behavior. No matter how intense their past arguments had been, he was always there, even if only physically. She got up and searched the house, expecting to find him sipping coffee in the kitchen, or lounging on the couch. Instead, she found him in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, completely withdrawn. He wasn't pouting. He wasn't angry. He was just empty. Clara lingered in the doorway, waiting for him to say something, but he remained silent. So she spoke first. "Ethan, what's wrong? Why are you sleeping here?" No answer. She pressed further, asking if he was still upset, if he planned to return to their bed, but he barely looked at her. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with anger or a plea for her to understand his pain. It was just a heavy, wordless silence that spoke louder than any words could have. Days passed and nothing changed. At first, Clara told herself he just needed time, that he'd get over it, that their life would fall back into its usual rhythm. But it didn't. Ethan withdrew completely. When she entered a room, he left. When she tried to start a conversation, he barely acknowledged her. When she reached out to touch him, he flinched. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something final. It felt as though he had erased her from his world without saying a word. Desperate to fix things, Clara tried to reach him in the only way she knew. She cooked his favorite meals, hoping the warmth of home-cooked food might soften him, but he hardly touched it. She made small gestures, leaving notes, offering quiet apologies through actions rather than words. Nothing broke through his walls. For the first time, Clara realized this wasn't just another argument. This was something different, something breaking apart. And she had no idea how to put it back together. She tried to lighten the mood with a playful remark, but his expression remained cold. She brushed her fingers against his as they passed in the hallway, but he tensed at her touch. Nothing worked. That's when a chilling realization struck her. For years, she had believed that arguing meant there was still something worth fighting for. That as long as they were yelling, they still cared. But now, the silence between them was heavier than any shouting match. It was a void. And that void felt like something essential between them had already faded away. Clara hadn't realized her words hadn't just hurt in the moment. They had torn open a wound Ethan had spent his life trying to hide. Ethan had always been insecure about his body, though he never spoke of it, not even to those closest to him. As a teenager, he faced taunts, mockery, and whispers behind his back. In high school, a cruel rumor about him spread, sparked by a careless comment in the locker room. But it grew into something that haunted him. He could still see the look on the face of the girl he loved when she heard it. Not anger, not pity, just a cold detachment, as if he had ceased to exist in her eyes. That moment stayed with him into adulthood. No matter how hard he tried to bury it, the insecurity lingered just beneath the surface. His last serious relationship had ended in heartbreak. He had caught his girlfriend with another man, and when he confronted her, she didn't cry or beg for forgiveness. She simply shrugged and said, "You're just not enough." Those words shattered him. From then on, he buried his pain, never letting anyone close enough to see it. He rebuilt his confidence, convinced himself he had moved forward. Then he met Clara. With her, he felt different. He didn't feel inadequate. He didn't feel the need to prove himself. He felt safe, valued. He believed she saw him for who he truly was, that he had finally left his past behind. Until that night. "You argue too much for a man. It's no wonder you're so lacking in that way." One sentence. That was all it took to unravel everything. It threw him back to the laughter in the school hallways, the betrayal, the shame. But this time, it came from Clara, the one person he never thought would hurt him like that. For the first time in their marriage, he questioned whether he could ever see her the same way again. Clara held on to the hope that time would bring things back to normal. But the longer she waited, the more distant Ethan became. One evening, determined to close the gap between them, she entered the guest room where he had been staying, expecting to find him scrolling on his phone. Instead, the room was empty. The sound of the shower hummed in the background. His phone lay on the bed, its screen still lit. She hesitated. She had never been one to invade his privacy. But then her eyes caught an email notification. Subject: questions about divorce proceedings. Her breath caught in her throat. Divorce. No, this had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. But deep down she knew the truth. This wasn't just about that one night, that one harsh comment. Ethan wasn't just upset, he was preparing to leave. When he stepped out of the bathroom, she was waiting, her heart racing. "Are you really thinking about divorce over one argument?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. For the first time in weeks, he looked into her eyes, but there was no anger in his gaze. No sadness either, just a chilling emptiness. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. "You think this is just about that night?" That was the moment she understood. It wasn't just the insult. It was everything. The unresolved conflicts, the growing distance, the wounds they had both ignored for too long. That night had been the final blow, but their foundation had been crumbling long before. In a desperate attempt to save their marriage, Clara poured her heart into making things right. She apologized over and over, not just with words but with actions. She cooked his favorite dishes, left thoughtful notes, tried to start conversations about anything: his day, the weather, their shared past. But his responses were always the same. Short, empty. That was the most frightening part. She could sense he had already answered the question she was too afraid to ask: whether he still wanted to stay. His silence said everything. Clara had always believed that regret was something you could fix, that with enough effort, any mistake could be undone. But this was different. This was a wound no apology could heal. One evening, as she passed the guest room, she stopped dead in her tracks. Ethan was packing. A suitcase lay open on the bed, his clothes neatly folded inside. Panic surged through her. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She stepped into the room, her voice trembling. "Are you really leaving?" Ethan let out a slow breath, his hands gripping the edge of the suitcase. He didn't answer right away. When he finally turned to face her, his voice was steady but heavy with truth. "I don't know if I can get past this." The words hit her harder than any argument could have. She had expected anger, expected him to unleash all the resentment he had been holding in. But this quiet uncertainty was far worse. Tears blurred her vision. Pride no longer mattered. "I love you," she said, her voice breaking. "I messed up. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. Just tell me what to do." For the first time in weeks, something flickered across his face. Hesitation, conflict, a hint of something beyond emptiness. He was silent for a long moment before he spoke. "You can't unsay what you said, and I can't unhear it." Her heart sank. But then he added, "But maybe I'm not ready to walk away. Not yet." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise to stay. But it was something, a thin thread of hope. And for now, that was all Clara had to hold on to. Ethan didn't leave that night, but the damage remained. The road to recovery would be long and difficult, and Clara knew some wounds wouldn't heal quickly. The real question was whether their love could endure.